Hey guys, and welcome back to some more Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links. For the past couple of weeks, I didn't post any new videos because I was tweaking around playing with different types of decks, some with success, some with failure. Did manage to gather a bunch of cards and I just tried around all sorts of tactics, but right now what we have and what I want to show you guys is it's a cheesy deck. It doesn't work all the time, but it's my take on what I would do to play the Quintet Magician. For those of you that do not know, the Quintet Magician is a spellcaster type monster, must be fusioned with 5 spellcasters, and if you fusion someone with five spellcasters that all 5 of them have different names, once it's on the field, you can destroy all cards your opponent controls, and this usually makes for a super easy OTK. OTK means one turn kill, because it has 4,500 attack, and once you get rid of all the cards, unless your opponent has a Kiteroid or another card that special summons after something is destroyed from the field, then you're basically winning the duel right there. But I'll get into details of other stuff that can stop this from happening. Right now, I just want to talk you guys through the idea of this deck and what I came up with it in order to make for summoning this a whole lot easier and smoother. I do have 4 duels for you guys as examples. Bear in mind they were not consecutive wins because again it's not super guaranteed win, but it is a fun deck to try. I'll show you guys after I explain my deck. So first and foremost, the card that you want to that's the star of this deck is the Quintet Magician, right? But I also have Dark Cavalry and an Arcana Knight Joker. Now, what I use to summon this magician is Magicalized Fusion. What this does is fusion summons a spellcaster fusion type monster from your extra deck by banishing fusion materials listed from it from your field or graveyard. Not your hand, just your field and your graveyard. Now this can fusion summon any of these 3. That's not a problem. I also have a polymerization here in case for some reason when I'm trying to get this card in my hand, I end up with any other fusion possibilities to get these other cards. So these are basically another way for me to actually win the duel, so I don't have to rely on just my Quintet Magician, and it works as you'll see in the examples. So what monsters do I use? As you can see, I don't have any trap cards, I don't have any other spell cards, and that's for a good reason because I decided to use 3 magical merchants. Now what do these do? If you flip this card, it excavates cards from the top of your deck until you excavate a spell or a trap card. Meaning, the moment I put this card face down and I flip it, or my opponent attacks it and flips it, it discards cards from my deck to the graveyard until I hit a spell or a trap card. And because the only spells I want to have in my hand are either the polymerization or, more importantly, the Magicalized Fusion, that means I can get almost all of these cards into my graveyard. Which means that in the moment, if, for example, I manage to place this card face down, it flips, it activates, and I managed to discard 5 spellcaster type monsters to my graveyard until I hit Magicalized Fusion, then I can use it and summon Quintet Magician, and if all of this works out and my summoning does not get stopped, I can destroy every card and basically win the duel. So that's the primary tactic. But of course it doesn't always go that way because depending on where these 2 cards are situated in my deck and when I use one of the magical merchants, they can either be the first card that I turn over, which has happened, or it could be the last card I turn over. which case if I don't, if I pick this last card and it was the turn my opponent attacked this card that I flip, during my next turn when I want to draw a card, I have no cards to draw and I deck out. So that's the possibility too. But obviously, the better chances are that I get to at least discard at least 3 cards until I pick either one of these cards. So in either case, it does help me put cards in my graveyard so I can summon Quintet Magician as soon as possible. Other cards, of course, I have 2 Dark Magicians. I have 2 Dark Magicians because I have a Chocolate Magician Girl, which also helps. Obviously, this is not a fast deck to play with. You know, the idea is that it takes time to mild cards from my deck to my graveyard so I can summon my Magician. So obviously, during that time, I need to have some sort of protection. And what this card does is I summon it on the field. It acts both as a milder, because if I discard a spellcaster I get to draw 1 card, but it also gives me some form of protection, because the moment when my opponent summons a monster and decides to attack my Chocolate Magician Girl, I can bring back a spellcaster from my graveyard. It doesn't matter what level or what's his name, just any spellcaster from my graveyard, and my opponent is forced to attack that spellcaster, and it attacks it at half its current attack. So it's definitely a way to deal with tougher boss monsters if my opponent is not paying attention, or it prolongs a turn at least. And if my opponent, because I've had duels where my opponent is also using a stalling deck, it is definitely a way to mill cards into my graveyard and also draw cards in order to draw these 2 spell cards. I also have a bunch of monsters that are I have 3 Gravekeeper type monsters because they're also spellcasters, but also because 2 of them can special summon other spellcasters. So if I get either the Nobleman or the Spy, I can effectively special summon 2 more Gravekeepers, which means that if my opponent has powerful monsters on the field, I can keep pushing out monsters to protect myself, to protect my life points, and at the same time discarding cards to the graveyard. And also I chose the Gravekeeper Shaman because it has an effect that it negates all monster effects that activate in the graveyard except Gravekeeper's monsters. The thing about this is, while it might impede my gameplay, usually when I use this is to stop my opponent's gameplay, because my opponent, a lot of the decks right now that are being used in PvP in Duel Links are highly focused on special summoning, and most special summons occur from the graveyard, and most effects occur from the graveyard. Like you have the biggest types of the decks that are going around: the Blue Eyes, the Arrow Mages, the Light Sworns. They're all the Shiranuis. They're all are decks that focus heavily on plays from the graveyard, and so I use this Gravekeeper Shaman to not necessarily stop it entirely, but more like prevent them from doing their own plays more smoothly. So it definitely gives me a bit more leg room and a bit more time. I have the Light Ray Gearfried here as well because it's also a warrior, but because it also benefits from a lot of the cards in the graveyard themselves, because I can special summon him by having 5 or more light monsters with different names in your graveyard. And as you can see, I have a bunch of light monsters here to use. I use this in case I happen to have him in my first hand when I start the duel. And if I cannot get any other cards, big cards on my field, then at least I have the possibility to get this card out the moment I have 5 light monsters. and it also doesn't banish them from my graveyard, so I can still use them for fusion. That's a good thing. Also, because it's a warrior, I can definitely use it to summon Dark Cavalry. That's why I have all these other types of warriors. I have Element Saber La Paula because it has 2100 defense. It's a light and it's a warrior. I also have other spellcasters that are light in order to use this both effects. And I also have the King's Knight, Queen's Knight, and Jack's Knight. Because the added bonus from this is I can also use them to special summon. Because if I have this, I summon this, I can summon this. Jack's Knight is also useful against if you happen to draw it and your opponent plays Lava Golem, I can tribute Jack's Knight instead of Lava Golem, so I don't have to suffer its negative effects. It's also fun if you get to mill your deck enough and draw cards. You have all three. You have polymerization. You can summon Arcana Knight Joker, which is also a pretty good fusion card. That also stops negative spell and trap cards, provided you have the same in your hand. It's also good. It also can be summoned through this because it's a spellcaster. The warrior, never mind. I'm sorry about that. But yeah, and they're also warrior type monsters, which means if I have any one of them and I have a dark magician, I can use polymerization and summon dark cavalry. And also, if they're sent to the graveyard, I can summon Gearfried. So yeah, it's added bonus, it's added benefit. Also have a time wizard here for kicks because it's light and a spellcaster. And a dark archetype that also lets me special summon a monster provided I get enough. What I have here is a Pixie Knight. A Pixie Knight is I never actually managed to use him, but in case I do happen to use one of my two spell cards and I don't win the duel, but somehow I'm still alive, I can have Pixie Knight sent to the graveyard as a result of battle, and I can have my opponent select one of the spell cards and put it back on the top of my deck, so I can maybe try again if I have the opportunity. That's pretty much how the deck works. It's mostly focused on it's mostly focused on having the Magical Merchant. This is my go-to card for building cards in my graveyard. If I cannot succeed in doing this, basically just my idea is to stall until I have enough spellcasters or until I have the possibility to fusion summon one of these, because they're also very good and can win the duel all by themselves. That's and also using Chocolate Magician Girl as a play. When I have her in my hands, I definitely wanna get her on the field and start building cards and start discarding and start drawing and stuff like that. So this is pretty much the deck. I also wanna say that I'm using Yugi for this right now because I'm trying so desperately to play PvP in order to get his skill. It's not Miracle Draw, it's Destiny Draw. I'm trying to get his skill Destiny Draw because it's such a good skill, but you can use different characters that makes it a lot easier. Right now I'm using his skill called Draw Sense Spell and Trap. This is in the cases where my HP drops by 1000 by some reason, I get attacked, cannot properly defend myself, and I don't have either of these in my hand. I don't have none of the spell cards, but I do have material to fusion summon. I can use his skill to pull either polymerization or Magicalized Fusion and summon one of my monsters, so it's super helpful in that way. Of course, you can use other types of skills, whatever you think it would work a lot better for this type of setup. I've tried using this deck for a while. I've modified it a ton. This is right now the best version that I can come up with the cards that I have. Of course, you can make it better if you have a lot better cards. It's not really all that expensive too. Chocolate Magician Girl is pretty much the hardest one to get, but you should have at least one Dark Magician because you get it from Yugi anyway, and if you play it against Arcana and you have him open, you should have another one too. So it's not an expensive deck, it's really easy to make. So drawbacks of this deck. Now, as I'm sure you figured it out, Quintet Magician does not have any ability to have its summoning not be cancelled. Also, Magicalized Fusion can be cancelled. So basically, one of the drawbacks from this deck is that you are susceptible to back row effects. Before you can get the Quintet Magician's effect off, it can be cancelled by a Floodgate, Ultimate Providence that can stop his summoning or stop me using the spell card. It can be stopped by a whole bunch of cards because until I can get my Quintet Magician's effective off. So that's also when if I do get its effect off and I manage to destroy all the monsters, people do have in their decks Kiteroids and monsters that can be special summoned once you destroy something, and also stuff that can be activated in the graveyard that can also destroy your monster, and a whole bunch of stuff. So that's why I'm saying it's not perfect. It's also a bit of luck based, but it's Yu-Gi-Oh! So what isn't luck based? Because it's basically a whole lucky game. Another drawback is it doesn't have nearly enough defense to prevent you from being OTK'd yourself before you can get all the requirements to summon one of these cards out. That means that you are very susceptible to decks that have blue-eyed white dragons and their alternate versions and spirit dragons and whatever, all that stupid shit that I hate, because I hate blue eyes decks. I hate every time I fight against them. It's just basically non-stop endless special effects, special summonings over and over and over again. It's so annoying. But yeah, there's literally few things you can do about that. That's really hard to play against with this deck. And yeah, pretty much what you're doing with this, if you can manage to get this out, is basically a one-shot deal. So if you don't manage to win in that turn, the odds are very slim that you'll be able to win after, because if your opponent has a decent deck, then he will find ways to bounce back, or at the very least just keep placing down monsters and decking you up. Because if you use one of these and you manage to discard a whole bunch of your monsters to the graveyard, then automatically, because it's just a 20 card deck, you have a good chance of decking out if you can manage to keep your Quintet Magician alive on the field, but your opponent cannot destroy it or bring out a bigger beatstick. The odds of you remaining out of cards faster than him is a lot greater, because you need a lot of cards in your graveyard to summon this card. But that rarely happens because most duels are pretty fast paced. I mean, not a lot of people use stalling decks. And there are some other things, but they definitely do not come to mind right now. So basically just OTK decks, decks that really disrupt your gameplay, as in banish your cards. If you get your cards banished, that's again another problem, because you need your cards in your deck. You don't have to worry too much about decks that destroy spell or trap cards because you're not using any, but you definitely have to be worried about decks that can special summon a lot of monsters and attack multiple times in one turn, because since you're relying on most of the time on just one monster on the field as your protection, and since you have only 4,000 life points, if your opponent manages to summon a lot of monsters, which basically also means OTK, so yeah, there's that. That's pretty much it. So this is the deck. I hope you guys, if you want to try it, I hope you guys enjoy it, and good luck.